C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
Chris is shit sick.
C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
Chris is shit sick.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast, aka JT Sports Live. Glad that you guys are tuned in for this Monday afternoon episode, and we got a really good one on deck. We're going to be alternating between the NFL and college football. I want to talk about why I'm surprised a lot of people are sleeping on the Seahawks. CJ Stroud, I believe that he's more than capable of being able to stop the Kansas City Chiefs from three-peating. The Philadelphia Eagles are poised for a major bounce-back year. And when it comes to college football, there are two quarterbacks in the SEC that I think are going to have fantastic breakout seasons. Colorado, they play the FCS powerhouse known as North Dakota State. Are they on upset alert? How good is Penn State going to be in 2024? ESPN's FPI, their college football power index, has them pretty much as a sure thing to be in the new expanded 12-team college football playoffs. But I don't really have that same amount of confidence. I'm going to tell you my concerns that I have about the Nittany Lions going into this year. And Oregon enters their first season of Big Ten play. I think they're about to steamroll that conference. Before we dive into it, make sure that you guys go ahead, like the stream, subscribe to the channel if you're new. Remember, we are not just a YouTube channel. We are a podcast. You can find this episode and all our previous ones available in audio format on all podcasting platforms. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from, the JT Sports Podcast is available. Follow us on Instagram at JT Sports _ and on X at JT Sports __. And if you're watching on X, shout out to you. Go ahead, like the stream, retweet it with your friends, family members. Spread the word of JT Sports. Shout out to our guy Kate Roan with the $9.99 donation. Stream has even started and he's already showing love. He says, powerful JT Sports Live, single-handedly raising the bar in football analysis and reporting. Appreciate you. Man, I appreciate you, Kane Roan, for supporting the channel, supporting the grind, and shout out to everybody that's tuned in on the live stream. Let's get into it. I was looking at over-under win totals last night, and I was very surprised that Seattle only has a projected win total of 7.5. And I was so shocked at how low the win total is because, in my opinion, under new head coach Mike Macdonald, I think that Seattle is good enough to win anywhere between 9 to 12 games and possibly win the NFC West. And why I feel this confident about Seattle going into this year is, for one, their biggest problem last season wasn't Geno Smith. A lot of Seahawks fans will tell you that Geno Smith needs to be replaced, but he's a really serviceable starter. The problem is that Seattle's defense was not good last year, and their defense hasn't been good since the early 2010s when they had Cam Chancellor, Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas. It's been a very long time since the Seahawks had a really good defense. And what was so surprising about how bad Seattle's defense has been the last couple of years is the fact that they're not bad because they don't have a lot of talent on that side of the ball. As a matter of fact, they have one of the most talented defenses in the league. It's been that way for the last 2 years. The problem is that they haven't had a coach who can maximize that talent. Well, you're getting that in Mike Macdonald. And this dude is supposed to be the Sean McVay of defensive-minded coaches. When he was the defensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens last year in 2023, they were the best defense when it came to points per game allowed, only allowing 16 points a game. They were 4th in yards per game allowed. They were 6th against the pass. They were 12th against the run. And they were 6th in takeaways. And one thing that really had me impressed about the way Baltimore's defense played under Mike Macdonald is that under his play calling, they shut down 3 of the NFL's top 5 offenses last year. They held the Detroit Lions to 6 points. The 49ers on Christmas Day, Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan, they got rattled against Mike Macdonald's defense. And the Miami Dolphins, the Ravens took them to Pound Town. With the talent that Seattle already has on defense, you got a stacked defensive line. You have multiple guys who can get after the quarterback. You're going to have a pretty good secondary. Devon Witherspoon is an absolute stud. You got Julian Love at safety. Seattle's defense should be probably the most improved in the league going into the upcoming season. You go from a bottom-of-the-barrel defense to a defense that is good enough to slow down these Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay offenses. And that's why I have a good amount of confidence that Seattle not only is going to be a lock to make it to the postseason this year, but I would not be surprised if they win the NFC West this year. It definitely is possible. The 49ers, I think they're due for a little bit of a regression season this year, especially with the uncertainty surrounding Brandon Ayuk. The LA Rams are still going to be a force. They definitely could win this division. But with you having a generational defensive mind at the helm at head coach, it's going to bring a little bit of a different flavor to a league that now is starting to pivot more heavily towards offensive-minded coaches. How do you find a way to counteract these innovative offensive minds, especially when you have 2 of the best offensive minds in the last decade in the same division? Well, you bring in a defensive-minded coach who is just as good as what these offensive minds are, but on the other end of the ball. Pete Carroll is going to be a future Hall of Famer. Nobody's going to deny how good he's been as the head coach in Seattle the last couple of years that he's been here, but we can't deny this defense has not been good for half a decade, and it was time for a change. Offensively, Seattle is more than equipped to be able to handle their own and put points up on the scoreboard. What held Seattle back, I'm going to say it once again, last season, Geno Smith was not the problem. Is he an elite quarterback? No, he's not. But he definitely isn't one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. If you were to rank Geno Smith from, where he ranks, I probably will put him top 16, top 15-ish. He throws a really good deep ball. He's really accurate, especially when he gets in rhythm. The offensive line is the biggest Achilles heel for Seattle. And like their defense has been bad for the last couple of years, so has this offensive line. Right tackle Abraham Lucas missed the good majority of last year. He's going to be coming back fully healthy. You have some concerns at center. Is Alualu Timmy really going to be the guy who can hold down the fork at that position, or somebody going to end up starting over him? There's some concerns on that old line they have to figure out. You get offensive coordinator Ryan Grubbs at the helm calling plays. He comes from the University of Washington. I think that he's going to be a perfect pairing for Geno Smith, because if you watch UW last year, what did the Huskies do better than any other team in college football? Throw the deep ball really effectively, especially outside of the numbers. And if you've been following Geno Smith, you will know that he happens to be one of the most accurate deep ball throwers in the league. This is going to be an offense that is going to be predicated a lot off shotgun. It is going to have a little bit of a college influence, but I don't see Ryan Grubbs as one of these coordinators that's just really good in college, and he's not going to pan out at the NFL level, because he's really smart. He's really good at adjusting in game. And Mike Macdonald has assembled a really good staff, and with how good this defense should be under him, and how capable this offense is, with how good they are at wide receiver, especially at running back too. You got Zach Charbonnet, who I think will have a breakout season. We know how good Kenneth Walker is. As long as you can get decent offensive line play, Seattle, there's no way they should miss the playoffs this year. If they don't get to 9 wins, that would be a massive disappointment if you're a Seahawks fan. Mike Macdonald should be able to come in here and fix what has held your team back for over half a decade, and that's been your lackluster play on defense. The talent's there. They don't really need to go through a rebuild. This is a team that is equipped to make it to the playoffs and maybe win a wild card round game if they, get that home field playoff game that you get from winning the division. But even if they don't win this division, they still, at best, can make it as far as the divisional round. In terms of where I ranked the Mike Macdonald hire, I had every head coaching hire in tiers. Tier 3 was coaches that I didn't think were going to succeed. Tier 2 were coaches that I didn't really know about. And Tier 1 were the coaches that I felt without a doubt were going to be Grand Slam hires. And those were Jim Harbaugh and Mike Macdonald. With how good the Ravens defense was because of Mike Macdonald, he throws a lot of different fronts at you. It's really easy for his players to understand. Not only is he a really good defensive mind, but he's just a really good coach in terms of coaching his guys up, helping them learn on the fly. He's everything that you want in a modern day defensive-minded head coach. And the good thing about the NFL being so offensive-minded is that when you have guys like Mike Macdonald who can come in and bring in a game-changing defense to slow down these Kyle Shanahans and Sean McVay, it gives you the leg up. I still believe that defense wins championships. We seen that in the Super Bowl. The 49ers defense couldn't stop Patrick Mahomes when it mattered the most. If you want to be able to win in the postseason, you got to have a defense that's capable of being able to get off the field and stop these elite quarterbacks. And Mike Macdonald is the kind of defensive mind who's good enough to get that done. The Ravens' defense showed up in the AFC Championship, but their offense got left in the locker room. And he probably was the best assistant coach in the NFL. If my memory serves me correctly, he was the NFL's assistant coach of the year. This isn't one of those hires that you should just gloss over. I'm really surprised that Seattle isn't favored to win more games this year, because to me, they're locked to win no less than 9, and they have the possibility of having the upside to be a 11, 12-win team and possibly take home the NFC West title this year. So you shouldn't be sleeping on the Seattle Seahawks. This defense is good enough to be an elite unit under Mike McDonald year 1, and this offense has more than enough talent to be effective this season. Shout out to everybody in the live stream, man. My guy Kate Rohn, he comments again. He says, may just be my bias, but I see glimpses of the Legion of Boom era with Witherspoon in particular. Yeah, Witherspoon is an absolute stud. He was one of my favorite players that I've ever evaluated. I've never seen a cornerback look so happy to make big hits on the opposing ball carrier. This is somebody who's going to come downhill, make tackles on running backs, make tackles on wide receivers. I'm not talking about just diving at your ankles. I'm talking about somebody who's trying to lay you the hell out. I was a big fan of DeJuan Witherspoon when he was coming out of Illinois. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in to the live stream. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Check out the JT Sports Podcast. We're available in audio format wherever you get your podcast from. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, the JT Sports Podcast is available. If you enjoyed this episode, we will greatly appreciate it if you give us a 5-star review. Is Colorado football on upset alert? Because week 1, they played the FCS powerhouse known as the North Dakota State Bison, who have won numerous FCS national championships over the past decade. Colorado is an 8.5-point favorite going into this matchup at home. And North Dakota State, since 2010, they are 9-3 against FBS opponents. Their last FBS win recently came against Iowa in 2016. And there is a large consensus out there that believes Deion Sanders and the Buffs could walk out of week 1 with a huge L on their hands and get upset by North Dakota State. How do I feel about this game? Honestly, I would be incredibly shocked if Colorado gets upset by the Bison. North Dakota State is a fine FCS program, but they are going through some turnover when it comes to their coaching staff. Their former head coach, Mike Entz, who led them to a couple of national titles. He was 60-10 the last couple of years. He left to join Lincoln Riley's staff. So they're going to have a new head coach with an entirely new coaching staff. And you have some concerns on the offensive line and in the secondary. But from what I've been reading about North Dakota State, there's a lot of confidence that this team is going to be as good as what it's ever been in all their years dominating the FCS. However, this is a Colorado team that, to me, they should easily be able to out-athlete North Dakota State. They have too much firepower on offense for North Dakota State's questionable secondary to slow down this passing attack. All right, you got LaJohntay Western, Travis Hunter. You got a transfer from Vanderbilt that was really good. You got Jimmy Horn Jr. There is a lot of talent in this wide receiver room for Colorado. Plus, with an improved offensive line, Shedeur Sanders is going to have more time to throw the football. He had a 27-3 touchdown INT ratio in 2023 last year. That was the best in college football. I expect for Colorado's passing attack to be surgical in this game. Defensively is where my concerns lie when it comes to the Buffs. They have a new defensive coordinator that has an NFL background. He spent some time under Lou Anarumo, who's one of the better defensive minds in the National Football League. And they did improve the defensive line as well. But I still don't know how good that secondary is going to be. North Dakota State, they are really loaded at wide receiver. They got a really good quarterback, and their running back room is also really good. Also, I could see this being a shootout between the Bison and the Buffs week 1, but I still don't see how Colorado loses this game because they are the most talented team. Even if you have concerns about Deion's coaching, going into the fourth quarter, there's a good chance that Colorado is at least up by 10, 14 points. Colorado isn't the same team that you saw only win 4 games last season. This is a vastly improved team that has a lot of dogs up front in the trenches. And everybody says football is won and lost on the line of scrimmage. Where North Dakota State, they only returned about 2 starters from last year's squad this season. They're still trying to figure out the kinks, and we still don't know how good their secondary is going to be. And we don't even know if this new coaching staff is going to be as good as the previous coaches that they've had roll through there, because North Dakota State has had a generational run. You got Chris Kleiman, who is currently the head coach at Kansas State. He's going to be a hot candidate for a lot of big-time jobs at the end of this year. And then you have Matt Entz, who was 60-10, won 3 FCS titles. It's only fair to expect for North Dakota State to eventually miss on a hire. And I think this could be one of them with the new head coach they have coming in, who served as the offensive coordinator for Wyoming last year. All right. North Dakota State gets too much credit for what they've been in the past and not enough for what they are now. And I guarantee you, most people who are betting against Colorado and are picking North Dakota State to pull off this upset, they don't even know half this information that I just told you, because they're just going off brand recognition. I remember when I saw it on X a few months ago, everybody was like, uh-oh, Colorado scheduled North Dakota State. Why would they do that? Well, this game has already been in the making for a while. And if you're Deion Sanders, you're not about to duck competition. This is a really good test to find out just how improved you really are. If Colorado loses this game, the hype train that I have for this team is going to go completely off the rails. I'm going to change my prediction. Y'all know I believe Colorado can win the Big 12 this year. They have the talent to do so. But if you lose to North Dakota State, things are really going to get ugly. This is a game that Colorado cannot afford to lose for a lot of reasons. All right, because the following week after, you got to go on the road to Lincoln to play your arch rival Nebraska. And if the hype train for Colorado gets derailed way too soon, all the recruiting momentum that they currently have is going to go out the drain, because then those narratives that people are pushing out in the national media about Colorado being nothing but a hype fest, they kind of are going to be proven true if they don't end up winning this game against the Bison week 1. This is a must-win game for Colorado, and they can't afford to come into this game playing with their food. They need to come out and dominate and show everybody that, hey, we're not coming anymore. We're here this season, and we're about to kick the mother effing door down. So I would like to see Colorado manhandle the Bison. I would like to see a dominant, decisive, flawless victory. If I had to give you a score prediction, I go Colorado 45, North Dakota State 28. I don't think they're going to roll North Dakota State. I'm giving them their due respect. But this is a really good Colorado squad that Deion has going into year 2. It doesn't matter about how you feel about his approach, taking the NFL method of building through the transfer portal versus using the traditional method of the recruiting. But to me, with how different college football is in today's time, we're going to see more and more coaches utilizing the transfer portal to quickly overall and turn around their new respective programs. And I think that Deion Sanders' approach is going to work. And this game is going to be a measuring stick to determine just how good Colorado is going to be moving forward. This is probably the best game that Colorado could have to start the new season off year 2 under Deion Sanders. It's not going to be some scrub FCS or lower the barrel G5 team. This is going to be a team in North Dakota State that, yes, you are paying them to come play you, but they got no problem of taking your money and kicking your ass too. But I love Colorado to win this game. They got a lot of talent on offense. Even if that defense still isn't that good, this is an offense that's good enough that they can outscore North Dakota State. I will find it hard for North Dakota State to get more stops in this game than what Colorado's defense is capable of being able to do, especially with you having 2 of the best players in college football on one team and Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders. Those two guys alone could be the difference in Colorado winning this game versus if they didn't have those guys, they most likely would have a good chance of losing it. This is a really good Colorado team that they have coming into this season. I don't expect them to lose to North Dakota State, and that's not me being biased. I was looking at North Dakota State's roster really thoroughly. They do have a really good team, but they're not the dynasty anymore that people think. As a matter of fact, South Dakota State is on their way to becoming the new dynasty of FCS football. This isn't the North Dakota State team that you remember winning all these FCS titles in the last decade. They still are a very formidable squad that Colorado can't afford to look over. But if I had to bet money on this thing and I had to give you a 1 out of 10 confidence level of Colorado's chances of winning this thing, I would tell you 20 out of 10. There's no reason why Colorado should lose this game against North Dakota State. They got a really good offense. They're improved in the trenches. I like Colorado to win this one. I don't see an upset happening. The Kansas City Chiefs are on the brink of becoming an official dynasty in the NFL. They are currently chasing their third straight Super Bowl, something that we haven't seen done in a very long time. And one of the biggest questions that we have going into this season is, can anybody stop the impending Chiefs three-peat? I don't trust Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen anymore because they are unable to step up in the fourth quarter. If you want to be able to dethrone Mahomes and the Chiefs in the playoffs, you have to show up with the game on the line when palms get sweaty and chests get tight, and Lamar and Josh Allen countless times just fail to be able to get the job done. Joe Burrow is the only active quarterback who has a playoff win against Patrick Mahomes. But I think CJ Stroud, if he is asked to step up to the mantle and he has to go on the road to Arrowhead to lead the Texans to a win over Kansas City in the postseason, I believe that he's more than capable of being able to get the job done. Why do I have this level of confidence in CJ Stroud? Well, I trust him because unlike Lamar and Josh Allen, I think he has more mental toughness than those two guys. I've never seen a game where CJ Stroud has got rattled. He's lost his composure. He's always cool, calm, and collected. And that's reflected by how good he was in the fourth quarter of games last year. He was one of the best fourth quarter quarterbacks in the NFL. He had 3 fourth quarter comebacks last year. He had a couple of game-winning drives. Of course, we're not going to forget when he just absolutely went scorched earth on Todd Bowles and that Buccaneers defense. He also had a game-winning drive against the Indianapolis Colts, the Cincinnati Bengals. In the fourth quarter of games last year, he had a TD-INT ratio of 8-3, and he was averaging 8.6 yards per pass, which was one of the best fourth quarter averages for a quarterback in the fourth quarter last year. The Texans have a good enough group of weapons where if you ask CJ Stroud to win the game and you put the ball in his hands, he can get it done against Patrick Mahomes. You see, when you're going up against Mahomes, it doesn't matter how bad he plays the first 3 quarters. All right, because we know in the fourth quarter, this is when Patrick Mahomes goes in that God mode. We saw it in this past year's Super Bowl against the 49ers. You see, the problem wasn't that Brock Purdy was a mid or overrated quarterback. The problem is that Patrick Mahomes just elevated his level of play with the game on the line. When Kansas City needed Mahomes to keep the drive alive and to go make plays to win it, he made plays. When he had that 4th and 1 conversion, he had that big read option run. And Kansas City, no matter how the game went, you knew if it came down to them having to go for 2 to win it, they were going to get it done because the greats always step up when the game is on the line in the biggest moments. CJ Stroud has that kind of capability. This dude is wired different mentally. He's cut from a different kind of cloth. I watched him all the way from his first season starting at Ohio State. He's not wired like how Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson are. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes. He's really efficient when it comes to making sure that he makes the right reads. He doesn't end up getting too stressed out. When I saw Lamar Jackson throw his helmet on the sideline after he threw that interception into double coverage, I knew it was game over, because at that point, Lamar Jackson tapped out mentally. And I love Lamar Jackson, but you wouldn't see CJ Stroud do something like that. Josh Allen, he played really good against Kansas City in the divisional round, but in the last 6 minutes of the game, he overlooked Stephon Diggs when he was wide open, and then he overthrew that dude for the touchdown as well. That's what costed the Bills that game. If you want to beat Patrick Mahomes, you have to step up and make the same plays that he's able to make in the fourth quarter with the game on the line, and that's what CJ Stroud can do. I know we've only seen one season of CJ Stroud, but I don't need 3 to 4 years to determine greatness. CJ Stroud is going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL for the next decade or so. Nobody needs to see anything more to know that CJ Stroud is him. He's one of those ones. Houston wasn't even expected to be relevant last year, and out of nowhere, they went to the playoffs, and CJ Stroud, for the majority of his rookie campaign, was in the MVP conversation. Imagine how good he's going to be this year with the improved supporting cast. You're adding Stephon Diggs, you got a healthy Tank Dell. Texans fans are telling me that this offensive line is going to improve, and if it does, CJ Stroud has everything that he needs to stop the Kansas City Chiefs from three-peating. There's only 2 quarterbacks right now that I trust to be able to stop this Chiefs three-peat from happening, and that's Joe Burrow, the Patrick Mahomes stopper, and CJ Stroud, because these are the only 2 quarterbacks, in my opinion, who you can actually trust in the fourth quarter of a postseason game against Patrick Mahomes to step up and make big plays in the fourth quarter to get the W. You ask Lamar or Josh Allen to deliver a game-winning drive against Kansas City, I can't trust them. We've seen it way too many times. And I love Lamar, and I love me some Josh Allen. But CJ Stroud, to me, is one of those ones, man. I love me a CJ Stroud, and this is somebody who, he relishes those moments. You ain't going to see him throwing his helmet if he makes a mistake off. After I saw him go crazy against Georgia in the Peach Bowl, that was all I needed to see. And everything, because so you don't miss when we upload new content and when we go live. If you're listening on X, leave a like, retweet, follow if you haven't already. We go live Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 6:45 p.m. Eastern time. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Kate Rowan says, if CJ keeps improving, look out Mahomes. My guy Chelsea Grin Kitty Cat says, Stroud in college was that guy. Not even an OSU fan, and I doubted him versus Georgia, but he proved me wrong, and the kicker lost them that game. In the NFL, he also proved me wrong. He is that guy. Also, if the Cincinnati Mayor kept his mouth shut, I think the Bengals would have won. Most definitely, man. CJ Stroud, ever since I saw that Georgia game, I saw just a different kind of animal that's been unleashed upon the NFL. I trust CJ Stroud and Joe Burrow way more than I trust Lamar and Josh Allen, who don't really deliver that good when it comes playoff time. Penn State is heavily favored to make it into the 12-team college football playoffs this year. The FPI, College Football's Power Index, feels this is one of the best teams in the nation, and they got a very good chance, in my opinion, of being able to disappoint everybody this year, all right? They still have major concerns when it comes to the wide receiver room. You bring in Julian Fleming from the transfer portal, but he still isn't all that great. When I was watching him in the spring game, he didn't really have any big moments that really made me go, wow. And the rest of the wide receiver room is fairly unproven. They're lacking depth. They lost Keandre Lambert-Smith to the transfer portal. He's now at Auburn. Your offensive line only returns 2 starters. And you have a secondary that is replacing a lot of experience that departed for the National Football League. Now, there are some reasons why this team could end up making it into the playoffs. You got one of the best running back rooms in America with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. You got a stacked defensive line. You got some really good coordinators coming in there. You hired the offensive coordinator from Kansas who did a really good job with Jason Bean, who was their backup quarterback last year. And Tom Allen is one of the better defensive minds in college football. And Drew Aller had a really good first season at the helm for the Nittany Lions. He only struggled against Ohio State and Michigan and Ole Miss in that bowl game. If you can get some good wide receiver play this year and the offensive line plays at a really high level, then this is definitely a team that's going to be a lock to get into the expanded college football playoffs. But the reason why I really can't call Penn State a lock to make it into the playoffs is because they have little games James Franklin at head coach. Okay, he's one of the worst head coaches in the sport when it comes to preparing his team for big time games. He's 12-25 against the top 25. He's 3-17 against the top 10, and he has a combined record of 4-16 against Michigan and Ohio State. But why has Penn State been able to consecutively be able to pull off 10-2 seasons? Well, the Big Ten has been one of the most overrated conferences in college football for the last couple of years. It's easy to only have 2 losses when you're only playing Michigan and Ohio State, the only teams that are good enough to rival you from a talent standpoint. But with Ohio State having a stacked team this year, same thing with Michigan coming off a national championship. They've already proven the ability to get over the hump, and plus they've been able to deliver in big games. Meanwhile, you look at Penn State, I see Oregon coming in, USC, Washington. The competition has ramped up. I trust Michigan and Ohio State to be able to beat these good teams that are entering the Big Ten. Can't say the same thing for James Franklin. And they got a pretty tough schedule this year. You got to play West Virginia week 1 on the road. That's a game that you should win. I'm not going to pick you to lose that game, but maybe it can get a little bit weird. West Virginia's coming off a pretty surprisingly solid season. You got to go on the road to the Coliseum to play Lincoln Riley and the Trojans. You can question USC's toughness all you want to, but one thing about it, Lincoln Riley is pretty good when it comes to having his team ready for big-time games. Last year was the worst season that he's ever had as a head coach. His track record speaks for itself. Can't say the same thing for James Franklin. I think that USC game for Penn State on the road definitely is going to be a loss because James Franklin hasn't proven the ability to be able to win these big-time games. And there's no reason why he should be given the benefit of a doubt until otherwise. And if you're a Penn State fan, you can let me know if I'm wrong. But I see this 12-25 record against top 25 teams. That shows me differently. Why should I trust James Franklin to beat USC? What? Because this narrative that USC is weak up front? Okay, even though they got a new defensive staff in there, their defensive line has beefed up. They've added combined total of 340 pounds on that side, on that interior D-line. Okay, you can call USC a weak team all you want to, but they're more than capable of being able to give you an L on the road. Then you got to play Luke Fickell and the Wisconsin Badgers. Wisconsin is a sleeper team. They could be really good. They could be a dark horse this year to win the Big Ten. Ohio State at home, that's an L because you're 4-16 every time you play Michigan and Ohio State. So, of course, you're going to lose that game. So, I can at least see Penn State losing 2 games before we get to the tail end of the season against USC, Ohio State, and then you play Washington at home. That game could go either way, but I definitely feel there's a strong chance that Penn State doesn't make it into the 12-team college football playoffs. This, to me, is more of a 9-3 team than it is a 10-2 team. And I get that Penn State has been one of the more consistent programs in the sport for the last couple of years, but I think they've greatly benefited from playing against a weak Big Ten that isn't really that talented. Okay, it's easy to go 10-2 when the only good teams you play that have the same amount of talent as you are Ohio State and Michigan, and you don't show up in those games at all. You bring in a new offensive coordinator who definitely is going to have Drew Aller playing at a really high level this year, but you still don't really have the proven talent at wide receiver to be able to have success against a defense as good as Ohio State's. Wisconsin's defense could be pretty good. And that USC game, yeah, you're going to be able to score points on them, but are you going to be able to go tick for tack? Because I know USC's defense is more than capable of being able to exploit this secondary that is replacing a lot of starters from last year. There is some serious concerns that I have about Penn State when it comes to them being a playoff team this year. I definitely could see a team in the Big Ten coming out of nowhere that can end up being the third best team in this conference for 2024. For so long, we've been so accustomed to seeing a Big Ten that's had a Big Three. But this year, with Oregon, Washington, and USC coming into this thing, I definitely think that there's a strong chance that Penn State gets knocked off that ranks of being a top 3 team in this conference. James Franklin is one of the biggest frauds in America because he doesn't have a good record against the top 25. 12-25, 3-17 against the top 10, and the 4-16 combined record against Michigan and Ohio State. It doesn't get more pathetic than that. Is James Franklin overrated? You're damn right he is. I don't want to hear anything about, well, where is he rated? Wherever he's rated at, he doesn't deserve to be rated. To me, there's not a head coach who's done more with less than what James Franklin has. Penn State recruits at a really good level. They bring in some really good recruiting classes. There's no reason why they should continue to get outclassed the way they've had in previous years against Michigan and Ohio State. And if you're a Penn State fan, please correct me if I'm wrong, but you kind of had a good enough team to beat Michigan this season, and you weren't able to get the job done. You had a good enough team to beat Ohio State this year. The problem with Penn State has never been they don't have the talent to win the Big Ten. To me, the problem has been little game James Franklin at head coach. He just is one of those head coaches that, you know, he's really good when it comes to beating up on teams you're supposed to beat, but when it comes to beating teams like Michigan and Ohio State, he doesn't show up in those games for some reason. I don't know what it is with him in these big games that he has a hard time being able to win, but I cannot trust him this year when you got to go against USC, you got to play Ohio State, you got to play Washington and Wisconsin. All those teams have fairly good coaches. USC has Lincoln Riley. He's been to the playoffs before. He's won numerous conference titles when he was in the Big 12. You got Luke Fickell, who took Cincinnati as a G5 team to the college football playoffs. You got Ryan Day, who's the most disrespected head coach in America. Jeff Fish is a pretty decent head coach. There are so many better head coaches now who are going to be equipped to expose James Franklin for the fraud that he is. He can't win big games. I can't trust Penn State to be a sure thing to make it into the college football playoffs this year. Do they have talent? Yes, they do. But the problem with Penn State has never been talent. It's been James Franklin. Last season got really weird for the Philadelphia Eagles. For the first half of 2023, they looked like they were going to be en route to making it back to the Super Bowl. Then they start 10-1, and everything just completely falls apart for them. And the big reason for Philadelphia's second half collapse last year was due to the bad hires that Nick Sirianni made when it came to his offensive coordinator and his defensive coordinator. He lost Shane Steichen, he lost Jonathan Gannon to head coaching jobs, and we saw how big of an impact they had in Philadelphia's success in 2022 because the guys they brought in and Brian Johnson at OC, he didn't work out. And then your defensive coordinator was so bad that you end up replacing him with Matt Patricia. And Matt Patricia, at the helm at DC allowed Drew Lock to engineer a 92-yard game-winning touchdown drive on Monday Night Football. So it was time for Nick Sirianni this offseason with his job on the line to get back to the drawing board. And what did he do? He brings in Kellen Moore as his OC and Vic Fangio as his defensive coordinator. Vic Fangio is one of the most well-respected defensive minds over the last decade in the NFL. He definitely should majorly improve this defense. Their second biggest problem last season, outside of their bad coordinator hires, was their secondary. Their secondary was absolutely atrocious, and that was evident by what we saw Drew Lock do to them, or not Drew Lock, but Drew Lock, and then Baker Mayfield exposed his secondary also in the wild card round loss. So how did you improve the secondary outside of hiring Vic Fangio? Well, you drafted Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, two of the top cornerbacks from this past year's NFL draft. Quinyon Mitchell is an absolute stud. Cooper DeJean is going to bring a lot of versatility. He can play outside corner. He can play inside the slot. He's a really good tackler. Then you bring back CJ Gardner-Johnson in free agency. And you still have a very talented defensive line with a good blend of veterans and youth. Jalen Carter is one of my favorite players in the NFL. The first half of last season, he looked like he was the runaway candidate for Defensive Rookie of the Year, and then his play kind of dwindled a little bit. We kind of stopped hearing his name called as much. He didn't have as big of an impact in the second half of last year as he did in the first half, but going into his second season, I expect him to be in the running for a Defensive Player of the Year. He's good enough to be one of those interior defensive tackles that could give you double-digit sacks. You still do have a few good veterans there who still can produce for you. You got Jordan Davis, who I think could also have a really big year for Philadelphia as long as he can have his conditioning intact. There's a lot of reasons to be convinced that Philadelphia's defense is going to be really good this year. Offensively, we already know that Philadelphia, from a talent standpoint, has one of the best offenses in the NFL. You got a really good offensive line. Yes, Jason Kelce going into retirement definitely does hurt you, but Cam Jurgens has been the man in place for a few years now to replace Jason Kelce. They have a lot of confidence that he's going to continue to give them high-level play from the center position. You got Saquon Barkley, who you take from the New York Giants and free agency now, and you add that with Devonta Smith, Buff Batman, and A.J. Brown. The question is, can Jalen Hurts bounce back? This is going to determine how good Philadelphia is going to be this year and how far they're going to go this season. Jalen Hurts in 2022 under Shane Steichen, he was an MVP candidate. He looked like a top 5 quarterback in the game. He got paid a lot of money following that season in the offseason. And last year, he looked like a shell of himself. Can he get back to the Jalen Hurts that we saw in 2022? I definitely believe that is possible. He's a hard worker, high character guy, first one in, last guy out. I think he was a little banged up the second half of last season as well. And even though Jalen Hurts had some bad performances, let's not forget that he had some really good games during the first half of the season. I look at Jalen Hurts and I still believe that he's a top 10 quarterback. I've seen some people say that he's mid. He's not even a top 15 quarterback. I think that's a lot of baloney. All right, Jalen Hurts is one of the best dual-threat quarterbacks in the game. He's a pretty accurate quarterback. He makes normally really good decisions with the football. But last year, with how bad the play calling was and the injuries that he was battling against, I just thought that there were a lot of factors that overall hindered Jalen Hurts' performance. But this season, though, I expect him to bounce back along with the rest of this Philadelphia Eagles team. To me, Philadelphia is in prime position to get back to the Super Bowl. The NFC East is not that good. You, without a doubt, are a way better team than the Dallas Cowboys, who not only lost Dan Quinn to the Washington Commanders as their head coach, but a lot of their depth that they had, that they relied upon when they had all those injuries last year, they walked out the door with him and followed him to Washington. Then you look at the New York Giants, you know those are going to be guaranteed wins the 2 times you play them, and you possibly split with the Dallas Cowboys, and I could see you mopping the floor with the Commanders because you're just a way better team than them. Nick Sirianni gets a lot of flack because people say, well, what the hell does he do as a head coach if he doesn't really help with the offense or the defense? He just hires guys to do it. Listen, I think Nick Sirianni is a really good rah-rah guy. The players seem to like him, and I like him, man. I love a head coach who jots with the fans. You got Big Don, who should be back on the sideline with them this year. Big Don not being there definitely kind of had a negative impact on Nick Sirianni. You definitely could tell it. It was a really weird situation, but hopefully with Big Don back on his side, that can help Nick Sirianni get back into what it takes to be a good coach. I don't think he's one of those coaches that doesn't do anything, because you can't be a good head coach and not know just a little bit of football. And you also got to be a head coach who your players respond to. You can't be a bad coach if your team makes it to a Super Bowl. It doesn't matter how many good hires you make on your coaching staff. At the end of the day, when you're the head coach, you're the head man. There's a lot of decisions that you have to make. You got to have good judgment when it comes to when to call timeouts, when to go for it on fourth down, when to use the tush push, when to punt it. I think Nick Sirianni is a solid head coach. Is he one of the best in the league? No, but I definitely think that he's top 15, and he definitely is overhated. Every single year outside of last year, Philadelphia has gotten better under Nick Sirianni since he's been their head coach. Okay, is he under a lot of pressure coming into this year? You're damn right he is. But can he deliver? Yes, because you got Kellen Moore, who, is he a top 5 coordinator in the game? No, but he definitely is one of the better OCs. You know that with him calling the plays, that your offense is going to be no worse than middle of the pack. And everywhere that Kellen Moore has been prior to last season, he's had really good offenses, really explosive passing attacks. And I think with Jalen Hurts being under Kellen Moore's tutelage, he should be in for a bounce-back season. I think Philadelphia's defense is going to be drastically improved under Vic Fangio. He left Miami not because he was bad, because he definitely didn't improve that defense. They were like a mid-20s defense prior to Vic Fangio arriving, and he took that defense to top 12 in the league despite the injuries that the Dolphins dealt with on the defensive line, losing Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb to injuries. Vic Fangio, he played a significant part in helping Philadelphia prepare for that Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs. And I thought that he was going to be their DC after the season to replace Jonathan Gannon. But I guess he just wanted to go to South Florida where the weather was warm and whatnot. Him coming to Philadelphia was one of the biggest offseason additions, not just when it comes to players, but just overall in the NFL, because I think that this defense is going to play at the top 10 level with Vic Fangio calling plays. I expect for the Philadelphia Eagles to have a bounce-back year, and I expect them to be in that Super Bowl discussion come January when we get into the playoffs and we start discussing teams who have the ability to win it all. The talent is there for Philadelphia. You improve this coaching staff. As long as Jalen Hurts bounces back and Nick Sirianni doesn't make any stupid decisions as a coach, Philadelphia definitely is good enough to win it all this season. The Oregon Ducks are entering their first season as a member of the Big Ten Conference, and they're about to run through this thing with ease. They don't have a tough schedule. Their 2 toughest games this year are going to be against Ohio State at home and on the road against Michigan. You're more than capable of being able to beat those 2 teams. And I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing Oregon go undefeated this year in conference play. Why? Well, this offense is still going to be an elite unit under offensive coordinator Will Stein, who's one of the best, if not the best OC in America right now. You got Dylan Gabriel, who you get from the transfer portal, who was a Heisman contender at one point last year for the Sooners. You got a stacked wide receiver room. You got a lot of talent and depth there. You got Tez Johnson, who was your second best receiver last year behind Troy Franklin. He led you in receptions. He also had 10 touchdowns, over 1,000 receiving yards. You got Evan Stewart, who was the second-ranked wideout from this past year's transfer portal cycle. And this offensive line should once again be in the running to be a finalist for the Joe Moore Award as they return 3 out of 4 starters, or 3 out of 5 starters from last year's squad. Defensively, though, is where I'm excited to see Oregon this year, because last year your defense was pretty good, but this year your defense has the opportunity to go from pretty good to outstanding. Dan Lanning comes from that Kirby Smart coaching tree, and with him specializing on the defensive side